There we go. Hello, Rashmi. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, my name is Rashmi Shivni, and I am currently a science communicator and I used to be an active journalist, science reporter, but now I work for the government with the FDA as a technical writer and researcher. And now I'm also working towards getting into grad school, which I will hopefully be starting this fall.
That's awesome. What got you into science communication?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I was definitely very interested in the sciences specifically, and I actually wanted to become an astronomer or an astrophysicist when I was younger. But as you grow older, you start realizing what you're actually good at and what you're passionate about. And by the time I was in high school, I was doing like high school newspaper and getting involved in those types of things and fell in love with writing. And then that also opened up my desire to learn about like all kinds of sciences. So that kind of broadened me and made me go toward the path of science communication. And so that's what my undergrad was in. I studied science journalism, and that's what I've been doing for the last few years.
Now, who do you usually see as your audience? Like people who are already scientifically inclined, or just the general public?
So that's a good question because I've done possibly like every job across the science communication spectrum. So I've written for the general audience as a reporter, just writing stories for the public. I used to work for PBS NewsHour, so a very broad audience, very um, focused on just the average person. But then I worked for like currently I work for the FDA, and so my readership is mostly scientists and technical experts. So it's definitely across the broad range of audiences.
What are some ways that you found whenever you were targeting sort of like a general public of really engaging them? Because it's been my experience that um, a lot of people may feel like it's a language that they can't understand, or that it requires too much work to figure it out, or it's just not something that interests them.
Mm-hmm. That's like the $1 million question, right? That's something we are all kind of grappling with all the time. But, my thought process with that is to um, basically like my job is to like digest all this information and make it very approachable for everyone. So when I'm usually like reading about a certain topic or interviewing scientists, like very very technical people, um, I'm asking them questions that they can answer, but also trying to get them to speak to me in a way that is like, hey, I think of me like a grade school person, like a child who is very interested but has none of that foundation that you seem to have. And I want to do the same thing for my audiences, especially like the average person, because that way it can also be very relatable and you know what you're talking about while making it approachable. So it's kind of like mimicking that step throughout the whole process, trying to make sure the information can be approachable on every rung of that ladder.
Well, since we're on the question of science communication, I should
Mm-hmm.
ask you, did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon again for the first time since 1972?
Yes, I am aware, and I've done a bit of other kind of exciting projects regarding that. So, yeah, I'm very excited to hear about that news too.
Um, so y your field may make you more inclined to pay attention to that information. But most of the people that I interview who have no science or space connection, like people at Starbucks on the street, usually the response is, no, I didn't know it was happening, and I think it's cool. Um, what, as a science communicator, would you recommend to NASA to actually change their approach so more people knew about it?
Yeah, what's interesting is I've noticed this too, especially among like people younger than me. Like I'm only 28. I've I'm still kind of figuring out my career path and everything. And I'm also learning a lot of stuff all the time. But people younger than me seem to not be as, I don't know, engaged, or maybe they're not following certain things within NASA or other agencies or organizations as closely. In terms of engaging people, I think maybe I know government agencies tend not to have the full like budget to afford, a full PR kind of stunt or marketing approach or everything. But things that seem to work, especially for the younger crowds these days, is to just like, get on social media, make these kinds of interesting packages for very little money, and kind of target them in a lot of different ways because people are just kind of always on these platforms now, like as you know, like on YouTube and TikTok or whatever, and that way you can start getting people to engage a little better while kind of making it more fun and exciting. And I really wish that Artemis kind of did this a little earlier because a lot of people, especially my age, or maybe even older, who saw Apollo or were inspired by Apollo, now that we have women going to the moon, that's like, this is like a big deal, especially for people who want to someday see themselves in a space like that.
Yeah, and I do have a theory though. I think you know there's been many plans to go back to the moon that didn't actually come to fruition, and
Mm-hmm.
I think people may see it, but then their mind immediately like discounts it because they're like, I'll pay more attention to it whenever I actually start seeing something happen. I was wondering
True.
what you think about that theory.
Yeah, there is that aspect. I think a lot of hype as of like the last, I don't know, maybe decade has been focused on Mars specifically in terms of like missions and rovers and everything. Everything's been very much Mars centric, and a lot of plans for the moon have kind of taken a back seat, I think. So you're definitely right about that. Um, in terms of like just seeing more action, I think just sending anything first and foremost to the moon is just going to get people excited again, right? So, like I'm sure you're aware Artemis is going through like phases. Um, so, like the first phase is just kind of like getting a trip back to the moon and back to Earth, like real quick kind of trajectory around the moon. And then the second phase is getting people around to orbit the moon real quick and then come back. So, the fact that we're kind of slowly kind of bringing people back in little phases that might get people, like just the general public, excited again. I wish it happened, 10 years earlier, but what can you do, right? Science, and especially space science, can be a very slow endeavor.
And there's also like this excitement aspect, which exists in like sports and contest game shows, where you're not really certain on the outcome, and people are kind of really on the edge of their seat, hoping one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But with space exploration, if everything goes perfectly, it's supposed to be boring.
Yeah,
Uh,
agreed.
so how do we make it exciting?
Without risking people's lives, yeah, that's a very good question. Um, there's a lot of I guess like pop culture and everything revolving around space and space exploration. A lot of those are very doomsday related type of stories. Um, I don't know if you've seen like any recent stuff. I recently saw like Space Force, the new season that came out, or this one movie that's called Don't Look Up. All of these things are like very much revolving around um, like Armageddon scenarios, maybe like a space race scenario where we're kind of competing with another country. So I think those types of things are planted in people's minds when they're thinking about space. They're like, oh, what can we like get engaged with because there's nothing like pressing happening right now. There's no asteroid hurling toward the Earth right now. But personally, like if you're a space enthusiast like me or you, we're gonna be excited about anything that happens, right? Like any sort of new research happening, any sort of new papers being published, all of that stuff. But for like the general public, I think we just need to get more people excited and excited early by like just engaging maybe younger people, like children, getting them more exposure to space and space sciences, astronomy, astrophysics, all that stuff. Just if you can kind of incorporate that into a curriculum early on, they can get more excited as they grow up. Kind of like how we've probably sort of developed that interest over time. But pop culture doesn't help, even though it's very fun. It's very interesting. But yeah, I agree.
I was thinking about some ideas of public engagement as you were talking. What do you think about the idea of maybe having a picture of like this field on the moon after Artemis 3 lands, and then people get a vote on which rock they want to come back, and then whoever wins, that's the rock that comes back, and those people get to come and touch that rock.
Oh, that would be fun. That would be really exciting. I think definitely things like that where you can get people to vote on things or get them to kind of have their own input on stuff can definitely get the crowd to grow a little bit larger. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I think every now and then when they send astronauts to the International Space Station, they take this thing called the zero G indicator, which is usually like a stuffed animal or some kind of keepsake that the astronaut can bring with them. Oftentimes there's like some sort of significance to it, like maybe this astronaut's child had this stuffed animal and that's why they're bringing it up to space and they're going to bring it back down. Something like that. So like I know that the International Space Station does little programs like that. So maybe we could do something like that for the moon, bring it there and back. I don't know. It seems like a fun way to get, especially children, engaged that way.
Yeah, yeah. So like here on Earth, people could propose different like moon artifacts to leave on the moon, and then maybe one of them gets selected or something.
Yeah, something like that. That would be really fun. I would put my name into that.
I was thinking, we did have one astronaut like play golf on the moon. Um, maybe we could have like a foot race. Like they mark out a field and see which astronaut can make it there quicker. Or
Yeah, that would be hilarious because I don't know if you've seen some of the old footage of like Apollo astronauts walking, like doing their spacewalks. Someone had kind of like fast forwarded through it, so like when you watch them kind of hop, it's like really funny and really cute. There's you can probably do like lots of different activities on the moon and film that, and it would bring in such a big audience because it like obviously the moon's environment is so different and just doing the basic things that we do on Earth would be probably vastly different.
I, how do you do things like that people find engaging and exciting, without it also being like gimmicky?
I know that's always hard because sometimes you watch YouTubers and stuff, which are like the new celebrities these days, and it can be really hit or miss on whether their like content actually is good or not. And I think that's a challenge that even I can't like always figure out these days. Like I've done like I've said, I've had to you know write stories and stuff and reach a lot of different audiences, and sometimes that revolves around doing a lot of different kinds of pieces. So maybe I'll write an article, but with that article comes a video, and with that comes like Twitter posts and Facebook posts and YouTube videos, and sometimes it's really hit or miss on like what platform does well. Sometimes you expect, an article to do well, but it actually does really well as a Twitter piece, like a thread of information or something, and you just never know. And the real thing to take away from all this is just to try different ways to engage people and see what actually sticks.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because if it doesn't stick, nobody will notice. It doesn't matter. But if it
Mhm.
sticks, it sticks.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kind of touched on it, various aspects of it as we talked, but uh, maybe you could summarize what you think about us going back to the moon.
How would I summarize that? Honestly, I'm personally excited just to have the fact that like we're bringing the first woman to the moon, we're bringing like the first person of color to the moon. Um, it's going to be interesting in the fact that we're taking like these people with new technology, right? Like new rockets, new equipment, and they're going to do like more science than they've ever done before. And these are things that really excite me, and personally I would love to do myself. I would love to go to the moon and do these things myself. And you know, the I am envious, but I'm also super proud that we're actually doing this finally after all these decades at this point. And it's kind of amazing that NASA chose like Artemis as like the mission name and everything, being like she's the goddess that's the twin of Apollo and our sibling of Apollo, and it's just like everything is really well planned out, and I'm really excited for us to get back on this adventure. You know, like it's been way too long, like I've said. We're overdue at this point.
So you mentioned having the first woman there, the first person of color, also legacy. Um, I guess, is there anything else that you hope we get out of going to the moon?
Yeah, so we're going to the moon and we're going to a different spot on the moon than we have been before, right? So we're going to the South Pole, which is a very different area, very uh, like unexplored terrain. And the reason why we're going there is mostly because scientists have pinpointed like craters and areas in which they think water ice is available. Now, that has a lot of implications in that, like, if we can harvest that water, if we can purify it, use it, we can possibly even build bases on the moon, you know, have like an outpost for people to actually live and do science and stay there for extended periods of times instead of like, you know, 5, 6 days or whatever, like they're going to be. And this is going to be like a good test run for when we want to send humans to Mars and possibly send humans elsewhere in the universe. So this is like a good springboard that is going to say a lot about how humans are going to start exploring the universe.
So whenever you think about the long-term future of humanity, like several hundred years out, uh, what do we look like? I mean, like what have we achieved? What do you think?
It's always so hard because like I want to be optimistic and say like, oh, we could possibly like, you know, explore our solar system or, you know, do all these things, but part of me is also like we need to also figure out our issues on Earth. We need to figure out how to, you know, fight climate change. We need to figure out how to not have wars anymore. You know, there's a lot of things that are still kind of you know, a little questionable at this time right now, and we thought these things could have been solved 100 years ago. Like humans 100 years ago could have thought like, oh, you know, our future is going to be a little bit better, but you know, progress is slow. So at the very least, I hope we can at least get humans back out there, explore the moon, Mars, figure out more of how we can sustain ourselves on Earth and be better to each other. But I do think it's going to be very incremental, unfortunately, just to keep myself grounded, keep myself a little bit more realistic about our endeavors. But yeah, that's that's about how as far as I can probably go with that. What do you
Well,
think?
well, maybe I should ask a different question. Where would you like to see us in 200 years?
Where would I like to see us? Okay, I mean, I would like to see us, you know, on the moon, more people there, more science going on, maybe even like have just people living there, you know, just being able to stay there for extended periods of time just to enjoy being on the moon. Maybe even on Mars just to go and visit and actually like experience what it's like to be there outside of just the science and the exploration parts of parts of the space travel missions. But you know, ultimately I don't think we'll be able to like inhabit fully like these bodies, like you can't really inhabit the moon entirely or Mars entirely because there's a lot of variables to consider. Like you got to consider atmosphere, having a source of water, having source of oxygen, all that stuff. But personally, I just want like more opportunities for a lot of different people to just experience things and to make sure not to like destroy anything. That's ideally what I want for these places.
If it was safe and affordable, do you think you would take a trip to space?
Hmm. I think so. As long as things have been tested, you know, like you're saying, if it's safe, like yeah, I would say yes. If I could afford it, if it was fully tested and made appropriate and safe for people to travel, I would say yes. Because these are things I've never experienced. Not most people have never experienced, and like for the vast majority of humans, like it would be nice to be another one of those people on the list of like here's the 50 people who've went to XYZ, you know, like that would be amazing to be one of those early few to actually go do something.
Um, yeah, how far would you go? Would you go to orbit? Would you go to the moon? Would you immigrate to Mars?
Mm, I think at this point, I would be willing to say I would like to step foot on the moon. Um, Maybe stay there for enough time, but maybe not live there. Now with Mars, I at this point I would say I'm not ready to go to Mars, but if say we bring humans there, they survive and do well, maybe my mind would change by then. But as of right now, moon and that's it.
Well, let's assume that maybe you or one of your ancestors goes to Mars, and several generations of your descendants have lived on Mars. And so you could imagine your great great
Mhm.
granddaughter has grown up on Mars her entire life, right? And now she's in high school and she's in history class, and she's been tasked with writing a paper, about the 2020s, just like we might be tasked with writing a paper about the early 1900s or early
Mhm.
1800s.
Mhm.
And she comes across this video with her great 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 grandmother. Is there anything about the 2020s that you think would be good to put into that paper?
That's awesome. That's a great question. Um, I would definitely wanna say that there's the one thing that makes me really proud these days is to see how like you know with the issues with the climate change and everything, how a lot of young children have come up and voiced their opinions and why we should like why more adults should care about improving the Earth's climate. That's one thing I want more people to focus on because I think children obviously are going to be the next generation and their children will be the next generation. And if we want to do things right for them, then we have to start considering what's the right thing to do right now, right? So if my great 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 granddaughter is looking back on this, I would want her to know that I'm trying to do everything in my power to have a good life for her, and I would hope a lot of other people would be doing the same.
That's awesome. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Rashmi, I know we talked about a whole bunch of things, but is there anything in particular? Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about, or perhaps any questions for me?
Yeah, so I did want to say that I did recently participate in a competition. This is for, so just as a little background, I've been doing some community college courses because, I have an undergrad degree in science journalism, but I'm trying to get into a master's program in astrobiology. So very different, more technical, more focused. Um, but the end goal is to do research and then also communicate the science I'll be doing. So I took some courses in community college. I ended up getting into this competition with the NASA Community College Aerospace Space Organization, and basically that whole experience was you learn to do a NASA mission. You learn to work with other groups and organizations, contractors, all sorts of things, and you form a mission and you choose where you want to go, which could be the moon or Mars, and then you choose if you want to do a rover mission or a habitat mission. And so in that competition, it's a very team-based focus, and we picked to go to the moon, and we picked to build a habitat on the moon, so a lunar habitat. Now, unfortunately, we didn't win the competition. It's totally fine, but that whole experience was really interesting in that you got to see how many different kinds of technical experts come together to put together a mission, and we all kind of play these roles. And it's just kind of like, it's almost like a game, but in the reality of things, it's a very fast-paced, hard work kind of endeavor, and it was a very exciting thing to do, especially because we're talking about Artemis now. It's something I was interested in just because there's so much going on with Artemis and there's so much going on with other Mars missions, and it was an exciting way to learn about those missions while kind of doing one on your own as well. So that was something interesting that I did that a lot of your viewership might take away, possibly doing that kind of competition in the future for themselves. So that was an exciting thing to try.
Well, that's a good point. How would you find out more about it?
Yeah, so if you are a student in a community college, you can contact your science department, most likely physics, or it doesn't matter if you're in biology or chemistry or whatever. You can contact your department and see if they have any affiliations with the NASA Community College Aerospace Scholars Program. If not, you can actually reach out to this organization. I can send you some links, and then kind of get the conversation started that way. So, very fun experience.
Now, you mentioned you're working on a master's or want to work on a master's in astrobiology, like
Mm-hmm.
life in the stars, if you will.
Yes.
Do you think there is life in other parts of the solar system? Is that what you hope to study?
Yes. Well, maybe I'm unsure about the solar system. I really hope there is in our solar system, but at the very least, my research goals are looking a little broader throughout our galaxy. Um, I'm gonna hopefully be working with a lab this fall, starting this fall, and the research project we would be interested in doing is looking at how photosynthesis could evolve in other places in our galaxy, and that's specifically looking at certain stars, long-lived stars called M dwarfs. Those are the red stars that we often kind of see on these diagrams and everything. These stars live for a long, long time, and they output a certain range of energy that is actually a good range for photosynthetic life to live off of. And so, especially like cyanobacteria or some kind of small microbes that could live in a condition that way. And so we're looking to study that, and we're kind of just looking at a species that exists on Earth, use that kind of as like an analog species, and see like could it possibly live on a planet or a moon surrounding that star, that kind of red star, and if it could thrive that way. So astrobiology definitely has a lot of different areas of study. A lot of my professor's colleagues can work on like trying to grow plants in low Earth orbit, or even with the Artemis missions, they're looking at creating habitat systems, life support systems. That's all astrobiology. So it's a very wide reaching field.
Um, so have you heard of a book by the name of Project Hail Mary?
No, I haven't.
So you're familiar with The Martian?
Yes, I am.
So the same writer, Andy Weir, he
Mm-hmm,
wrote
Andy
a
Weir,
book
yeah.
called Project Hail Mary. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as a astrobiologist, you might really like it.
Yeah, I'll look into that. I did read The Martian. Martian is excellent. What's the Project Hail Mary about?
Uh, a lot of the fun in reading the book is the sense of discovery and surprise and misdirection.
Okay.
So I I I don't want to take away any of your joy.
Okay. That's fair. Thank you, though. I will look into that recommendation.
Um, well, awesome. Well, did you have anything else that you wanted to share, or any other questions you had?
Yeah, so I was wondering, like, how did you get inspired to do this? I saw that you've been doing this for a while now, and we're coming closer and closer to that deadline of bringing humans back to the moon. So, how did this kind of start for you?
So you have to rewind back to December of 2019. This is pre-COVID,
Hmm.
so this phrase has no meaning at this point. But at that point in time, I had been working from home for 2 years,
Mm.
and I realized I was only seeing my family for weeks at a time. So that in combination with the fact that there was this associate administrator at NASA that was tasked with getting us to the moon by 2024. And he had a lapel pin where he was counting down the days to the end of 2024.
Hmm.
And he was planning to go around NASA and highlight the hero of the day that was helping to get us to the moon. And I, just kind of clicked that I should do a similar project to talk to regular everyday people, non-NASA people. And that this, my plan was to do them all in person, which I did between December and March. But with the COVID lockdowns, under normal circumstances, going up to somebody at Starbucks and saying, hey, what do you think about us going to the moon is a little risky. But
Hmm.
whenever you add COVID to it, it really makes it a little bit too much even for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I started doing them online, but that's what got the project started, was that. And now, even though the Artemis timelines have moved out, I'm still planning to continue the project until the end of 2024, and hopefully have a big party at the end of it, which I'll invite everybody to that participated. So
Oh, that would be so fun. That would be very exciting.
hopefully, Artemis 1 and 2 would have been completed by then.
Yeah, at the very least, I think two should at least start by that point. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. If the launch of Artemis 2 is right at that time, that might be
Hmm.
we can have a watch party and end of project
Yeah,
party.
that would be awesome.
So, and it's like so neat. It gives you an excuse to talk to people and have a meaningful conversation.
Hmm.
Like, I just happened to be walking by this guy on this walk where I was. I didn't have anybody scheduled for that day. And so I was like, hey, I'm doing this project. And, we really had a chance to share views. And yeah, it was kind of neat to see how deep people think and what their thoughts are.
Absolutely. And you're doing a very a brave service. Something we used to call in journalism school like man on the street interviews. And when I first started doing those, I was so nervous. Like I'm a very shy kind of introverted person, so being kind of tossed into that and forced to like talk to people you've never met and try to learn a lot as much as you can in like 5 minutes or something, it's very hard to do. So props to you for doing that a bunch this year, past 2 years.
I wonder how much easier or harder it is being like a reporter and working on a particular story. Like, hey, I'm with WYYG or something, doing this, trying to get people's opinion on what you think about the color purple. Can you tell me what you think? It just feels like that might be people. I mean, my biggest problem is I go up to people and I say I want to talk to you about the moon. They're like, "What are you trying to sell me?" Or "Where's the scam?" Those are my two biggest
Yeah, just
problems, I think.
waiting for you to bring out your soapbox, you know? Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? Like, I've been, if you're with an organization that's well known, people want to talk to you, right? Like, they want to be on TV or they want to be a part of your story. But then if you're part of like a low level publication no one's ever heard of, they're like, should I talk to you? Is this even legitimate? So I completely understand that. But you're doing great work, and it's very interesting, and it's fun to watch. Hearing all these different perspectives on going to the moon. I'm amazed at how so many people actually don't even know we're going to the moon, and it makes you realize that you're in your own bubble. Like people like me who are interested in space, we're in our own bubble, and we're constantly like feeding off this information, and you forget. The average person might not even know.
Exactly. Um, yeah, and that's true of everything. I mean, be it about the animal rights, our water quality, our um, organ transplant availability. If that's like your thing, you're really deep into it. If it's not, you
Mm-hmm.
probably don't know anything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100%.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome, and I look forward to that party invite. All
Definitely, I look forward to sending it out.
right, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, have a good evening.
Bye. Take care.